Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. Hi, guys. So I hope you're doing well and staying safe out there. I know the world feels like it's in a pretty messed up state right now. And yeah. Anyways, on the past podcast episode, I was going into print-on-demand services and various services also that, help with printing if you can't do it yourself, for your literary magazine or journal. So listen back to that episode. Again, I have been doing some articles tied to each one, a list, pros and cons of my experiences and thoughts with some of them. I, of course, don't cover every single one in existence, but just the ones I've heard about, I'm familiar with, or have used myself. Yeah. So today, the question of the day is, I guess, I want to go into subscriptions, subscription platforms. And I guess we could phrase it as, how do you set up subscriptions for your Lit Mag or Journal, or how do you set up digital subscriptions and print subscriptions, both digital and print subscriptions for your Lit Mag or Journal? So, yeah, I'll share with you guys. I would say I have more experience with digital subscription systems and mobile app ones. I haven't, let's go back to, I mentioned on the past podcast episode, I, had run into some issues with the first POD we had went with. And in between that, finding a new one, Dippity originally, issue 1 was released, out to everyone technically, digitally. Instead, while I was figuring out and finding another place and getting, blurb set up. So, yeah. Now, the way I had it when we had done issue 1, it was just like a digital PDF download that others could purchase behind a wall and stuff. So that was through, I think, Selfie or Selfie. I can't remember. It's like SELLFY. But yeah, there's various different, shop options where you can set up PDF downloads, but that's not necessarily a subscription system, although you can facilitate memberships on some of those platforms for things like that. I've seen others do membership options, I think, through Forrow and some additional bonus things. But, yeah. Anyways, I think in terms of, print subscriptions in that space, I don't honestly have a whole lot of knowledge on that. I would say that was probably a mistake on my part. Not necessarily a mistake. I was really focused on getting a Lit Mag and Journal up and running. I, started Dippity originally online as a site and then migrated slowly into print, putting poems in print and stuff. And I think from the start, I would have preferred to set up or facilitate a digital and print subscription option for, others. However, considering I don't have the ability to physically ship out issues and everything like that, because you really need, you need to have help with that, or you need to do it yourself. And that can be a bit much, tracking all of those orders, especially if they're international, so you really need to have, be on top of that, or have a team or someone to do that, from wherever you're based, right? So, yeah. I would say I'm going to cover more so some digital options, digital subscription options that I have encountered and tried or used or reached out to about. So Dippity Lit Mag, the only digital subscription place we got into was Caffeine. That's CAFEYN. Now they're based in France, but they also have readers in Canada and other, locations. And they have a mobile app and also a web version, and they, give users a 1 month free trial. I am unaware, how many checked out Caffeine when we were using it. Now we're doing the relaunch, so it was a very brief window of, really leveraging it, and we weren't releasing several issues a year or anything like that, right? About 1 to 2 on average. But yeah. Caffeine was awesome. I met and had some calls with a few digital subscription places, virtual calls, and, they answered all my questions. I also met with Pocket Mags Pocket Mags, it's cool. They have a lot of, capabilities in terms of branded apps. However, the costs associated with that are very tough. If you go into the App Store and search digital magazine readers or something along the lines of those keywords, magazine reader apps, you'll find a lot out there, actually, and you'll find quite a few magazines, some of the larger ones and a couple of other ones I haven't heard of or read before in there. They have their own app, for their magazine. I think the Poetry magazine or a couple others have their own, like digital reader app too. I think that would be cool. I totally would love to get, Dipty its own mobile reader app. That's partly why I was also interested in, I think it's Yumpu or Yumpu. Sorry, the name is hard to pronounce. It's YUMPU. But yeah, I had also uploaded Dipty through there digitally as a full preview for others to look at and things like that briefly. And then we still have some of our issues up there and available. I think our antique one and back when they allowed, some to be uploaded free, just like one. I think they dropped down to one now or something like that per, account. And then you have to pay. It was kind of costly to do that, so I didn't, and their higher plans to get, into their mobile reader app, to get your own, monotonized space, for others to read and access, it can be expensive. So you really have to develop and build up, a high readership level, or you could say, I don't like using the word following or followers, but, you have to have a significant readership to really cover expenses if you're going to go with something like a mobile app system for reading and stuff. And there are other ones out there, flip book type, things like that. And maybe I'll cover that in a separate episode, because there's a difference between, just regular like flip book services where you can just upload issues and others read it. And usually a lot of these places, similar to Yumpu, sorry, I'm going to keep tripping up on that name. Similar to them, you have like a fee, right, for keeping it up, digital issues to be read. So yeah, I'm more so for this episode discussing digital subscription apps and web spaces, both web and mobile. So Caffeine is one of them, CAFEYN, and then Pocket Mags is another that I reached out to. Now, the thing about, let's see if I can get to my notes here on it when I was looking back at it. So I think the issue I had with Pocket Mags was the cost. Like, it was outside of the range for the budget I had. And they have a lot of great, capabilities and things like that. Since we had like 178 pages, our page count and stuff, they have some platforms where they charge, per issue or based on your pages you have, for their mobile, capabilities and other stuff. The pagination and stuff, it can be, it can get into the over $100 or so. I think they were quoting like slightly under $200 for issues. That was per issue. So that's really expensive for me, per se, I think. Now, Pocket Mags is great again. If our budget ever changes, I think it'd be cool to do like a little branded app. There's a lot of cool things you can do in some of the apps, Some allow you to have like video capabilities, some more interactive features in there, I think. And yeah, I think, it really depends upon, again, your budget, which one you want to go with, digital reader wise and subscription services out there. Again, I'm just speaking about digital. For print issues and print subscriptions, I know some have various paywall systems that they use that integrate with WordPress. And I've never really used anything like that. And but everyone has a different subscription model typically. Some lit magazine journals don't have any subscription models. And yeah, because it's kind of tough to manage and maintain that. But there are totally some really stellar subscription options out there. And I think I heard about, so like, was it Leaky? Someone had mentioned Leaky a while back. I think it's Leaky through WordPress or something. You can like set up, I think, like paywalled access or something in a digital format too. And there are alternate ways to do print subscriptions tied into that. I don't know much about that, but I've heard about it from different magazines and publishers. There are other places out there and where you can do back issue subscriptions. I would say that digital is a bit easier to set up. That's what I was saying, because I haven't started print subscriptions or anything like that. I think it really comes down to having like a paywall system, and where there are accounts created for each email and their details, for their address and stuff, and then keeping track of that, whether the subscription is like how many issues they get for the year and stuff. It can be hard to juggle. So there are tons of services out there. A lot of not just lit magazine journals, but I'm saying a lot of magazines in general across the world have predominantly gone, with at least a digital option, or some subscription model. So I think I also heard about, Profile Press. I think that is an alternative to Leaky paywall. Again, WordPress. If you're using WordPress, I think you have a lot more, flexibility with, paid membership stuff that you could facilitate with print and digital subscriptions. So you might just have to do some research on that, like paid membership apps through WordPress. And I think they have like there's various, ones like Profile Press, Leaky Paywall. I haven't used them myself. I've heard a couple people in the community using them. Sounds cool though. So yeah, I think I really like caffeine because it's free. I don't have to pay over $100 an issue or anything like that to upload issues. For a lot of the free, there aren't a lot of free digital subscription options out there. I did a lot of searching and I had only come across about 4. One of them, I can't remember what it was called, but it was really geared towards for some reason they were uploading a lot of erotic magazines. I was like, this wouldn't be appropriate to really put Dippity in, in their system, because it's like, there's a lot of erotic, magazines. Also, I was reading some sketchy reviews about it, but anyways, I forgot the name of that one, but I came across all kinds. There was another one based out of Japan that I had also reached out to, but they had mentioned that they didn't feel our content was popular enough for their audience or wouldn't be popular for them. So, that was a no. So basically, these mobile and web application subscription services, they have to, screen your publication and accept you into it, some of them totally. And you have to, get approval to be in their, catalog space. So, yeah. And yeah, so I totally understand that, not everyone's going to, feel the same way about your issues or the content in them and things like that. We are doing a relaunch and stuff and changing some things, but yeah. Anyways, there are some cool ones out there. Readly was another one that is free, I believe, and Readly. So yeah, you can check out them as well. You basically, to get into a lot of these mobile reader apps, you have to just reach out. You have to reach out, especially to some of the free ones out there. There are mostly, again, predominantly paid ones and mobile app services out there, and they can be really costly. I remember I got a quote from another app. I think it wasn't Zinio or something, Zinio. I reached out to them and a couple other ones, but I don't think it was them. It was another one I had contacted, and they had quoted me like $500 a year for, uploading issues, and stuff like that. And I just think, there's no way we would ever be able to, recoup that or get it back, of $500. There's no way. With our current, readership level and the issues and stuff I'm seeing. So I thought it would be best to, go with a free one, right? Because there's free options out there if they, of course, accept Dipty into their catalog space and stuff. So yeah, the only one I was able to get into at the time is Caffeine. And I think Readly is also, I could be wrong, I think has ties to Caffeine in some way for... and things like that. I forgot what it was. There was a news article about that within the past year or so. But yeah, a lot of cool apps out there and services to facilitate, paywalls, paid memberships, or subscriptions. I would say if you're on a very tight budget, go look at some of the free options out there. I mentioned Caffeine. I mentioned Readly. And Yoompo, it's hard to afford, their paid options. It can be, very expensive. Like you can, from some of these apps again, the other ones I reached out to, it was again several $100 quotes and stuff like that for issues, uploading, all of that and stuff, or their monthly fees were very high. So yeah. Let's go out to the App Store here and see what's out there, though. Anything else I missed. So I'm going to type, and I have an iPhone, so I'm going to type digital, or I should type magazine reader apps. Yeah, let's type magazine reader apps. Magazine reader. Let's see what comes up. Okay, so here. So we have Magster. And I can't remember if I reached out to them. I might have. I didn't get replies from some places I reached out to across the year. But Magster, Magzter. And I typed magazine reader again in the search. There's Press Reader. Yes, I think I reached out to Press Reader. I can't remember. It was either Zinio or Press Reader. One of them definitely had quoted me a very high price. I don't remember which one, though. But yeah, they have tons of magazines and newspapers in Press Reader and Magster. So, yeah, I think it's showing for Press Reader 15,000 reviews and Magster has 5,000 reviews. Readly, they have about, let's say, 600 something reviews in the App Store, it looks like. It says about 6,000 magazines and limited access and stuff. And basically, I'll also add, so the way it works, for some of these apps like Readly and Caffeine, so I don't remember what Readly is, but like Caffeine, they sort of, they take a percentage of the issue, subscription readers you have, right? Some of the readers out there I came across, they do a 50-50 split with you, or some of them do a 60-40 split, and yeah, and a lot of the other ones I mentioned too have something similar model to that, a split, it's not always down the middle per se. So yeah, I think back in the day at some point in time, right, Amazon had a lot of magazine subscription options, right, and they halted that, or that's like stopped now, right? And I think that's really unfortunate because I think it'd be cool, if Amazon was more friendly towards that, and things like that. Yeah, so Caffeine, has about 800 views in the App Store. So Kono, yeah. So I reached out to Kono. We were unable to get into Kono, but, still a very cool app and service. You have to get, approved by, different, you have to get approved. They typically want to see previews of your issues. They want to know about your content and things like that. You have to be screened by, whoever, is overseeing, issues and their magazine catalog library, Yeah. So Kono is based out of Japan. I know there are I know of a couple lit mags and journals that are based out of Japan, actually. I didn't see any, poetry-related content in there, in Kono, I believe. Caffeine, I think we were one of the few lit mags that were in there. The only one I saw. I didn't see anything in search. But I hope, over time that changes. And yeah, some of the other ones I mentioned earlier, I did see some poetry related, or even some that focused on short fiction and things like that. I think after dinner conversations, I think they were on Readly. I could be wrong. I think they were. But yeah, there's several other ones. And as you go through the App Store, you'll come across a lot of, again, branded, apps as well, like I'm seeing the Atlantic magazine has its own app, Guitar World magazine has its own app, Reader's Digest, and, things like that. So to get your own app, I think, again, you have to build up significant readership because it can be expensive. I personally did try to, not creating a magazine app per se, but deployed a test app to the App Store once because I was always curious how it worked and stuff. And it was just some, directory search thing. I was testing, and it's costly, there's like, developer, fees. Apple's more expensive than Android, the annual fees for that. And yeah, so you have to have, if you're going to go for both the print and digital subscription, system of some kind, you have to really, have a significant readership built up, or be able to cover the expenses of it yourself, out of pocket. You might have to if you're starting out. Yeah. And a lot of different ones out there. And, something you want to ask, when you're reaching out to places, right? What's the cost? Are there monthly costs associated? Is it free? Are we able to get in? Things like that. I just asked like general questions to a lot of these, magazine readers out there and the apps, and yeah. So, you want to, ideally go with one of the free ones out there in existence. There aren't a ton that I came across, but there are definitely options out there, to do so if, you want to go more so for a mobile, or web-based readership subscription model, or have some sort of platform or service help you with that. There are options out there. You just have to, meet the requirements and stuff. And, yeah, it's going to come down to, do they like the content and style of your magazine? Does it fit their catalog and stuff like that? And yeah, Readly is really cool, though. We're not in Readly, but yeah, I think a lot of us read on the go. We're always, we have our devices on hand and stuff. So I think, over time, more and more magazines are probably going to, digitize. Print's still going to be an option and stuff like that, but I think a lot of others, read on their mobile, and it's a good option to have. Not everyone always buys print issues, so reading apps can be very beneficial. And yeah, so I always recommend, you get a trial account with one you're interested in and test it out. Again, some of them have a very low, subscription fee, and some for the month, and some of them don't. So on both, the user, side, and also the, magazine side, this is where you want to be very mindful again about your page count, because some places, again, I reached out to, they're like, it's going to be between, let's say $150 and $200 for your issues, based on the page count, and that's costly. We had, I think at the time, about 4 issues, so that's like really quite high, yeah. And yeah, so I always, again, try to stick to platforms that are geared towards, no cost down for, for starting out or anything like that. And yeah, just is less stressful, right? Because, there can be a lot of fees associated with magazine and journals. So yeah, I think one of the options I'd reached out to, I was looking at my notes, I think it would have been like $640, to get started with one of them. And that wasn't even including the monthly fees. So that was expensive, right? So yeah, I didn't end up going with that one. Yeah, I think that was Pocket Mags. But honestly, out of some of the ones I mentioned, I think Pocket Mags is very cool. a lot of capabilities, I mean, that you can do with their solutions and services, subscription wise. And but yeah, I really love Readly again, Caffeine, and check those out. Some of the other ones I mentioned, I'll list the ones, I'm aware of. Mainly, to get into one of these reader apps, some of the ones out there, you just have to reach out and, meet with them, ask questions, and see if it's going to work for you. A lot of them, again, do have fees, and a couple of them, a quarter of them, or less than the ones that in existence that I've come across thus far. Very few are free. Where you have splits. Like 50-50, 60-40, stuff like that. In terms of the number of readers subscribed to the subscription model in place, and your issue costs. So I think we set up for Caffeine at the time, and I have to notify them about our relaunch too. And I'm not sure if we're going to stay in Caffeine after our relaunch, or probably have to get them to approve, our issue layout, or see if we're going to continue with them. Because it comes down again to the layout and our sections. I mean, our issues are pretty much going to be, a lot of the same sections and stuff. So we'll see though. I'm not sure yet. I'm just letting you know, if you were looking for us and you don't see us in Caffeine, that's because, we're relaunching and, changing things up. So, but yeah, check it out though. Still a very, very awesome app. And, they were very cool and answered all my questions. So, in terms of, apps and readers, those were the ones I could think of off the top of my head, and the other ones I, was going through the App Store again, and I'll link them down. I may do a typed article on this out there somewhere. I usually do the articles a bit after each episode, so I hope this helped you. Again, I sadly don't have an extensive knowledge on, print subscription models, but totally, there are a lot of options I've seen, more so for WordPress. I'm sure there's some for, places where they don't integrate with WordPress. There's some perhaps out there for other sites and spaces, based on perhaps Squarespace or Wix. I'm not sure, or your own website built from scratch. Definitely a lot of options you can go with. Again, I mentioned there are some places that do drop shipping and help with, shipping and delivery. And I think I mentioned Bookmobile, based out of Minnesota, and some other ones probably exist out there. But yeah, it can be tricky. I said tricky. I always trip up on one or two words now and then, or a couple words. Sorry, guys. But it's tricky. It's tricky again to do, print and digital, together, like in a bundle subscription service. I've never really done that. I've always, done it, a separate thing, just solely with digital subscription access. That's the most experience I have, digital options. Again, I've seen some lit magazine journals set up some sort of membership option through, a shop. There are a lot of, merch shop type apps or platforms, I should say, that you can set up to facilitate, subscriptions, or membership subscriptions, I should say. So, membership to your site and some bonus stuff or bundling things, totally possible. Sometimes I've seen lit magazine journals use Submittable for, selling issues and back issues. But I think that's kind of hard to keep track of. But that is a way to do something like that. I think that's a bit tricky, though. So, yeah, I highly recommend you check those out. And yes, I wanted to mention, so there are some, library type apps out there, or I should say some services and platforms that focus on digitization for, libraries. And I haven't gotten into any library type systems per se. I think one I've heard of is Libby, Libby, the Libby app. And not every place. I think some apps, some have location restrictions and stuff. So you have to keep that in mind and too. But anyways, Libby is cool. I think they do like audiobooks, ebooks, a lot of things. They're part of Overdrive. I wasn't able to get an Overdrive account. They said we didn't have enough volume, in our at the time too, which is understandable. We only have a very small series started and stuff, and we're doing a relaunch. And yeah, and you can, you can not get access, but I'm saying you can submit your publications, through their other, particularly I think like chapbooks can be digitized, things like that, for example, through things like Draft to Digital, and you can get into some of the other services out there that are like large, massive ebook libraries and apps. I think is Hoopla one of them, Hoopla, that could be another one. But yeah, Libby app, Overdrive, Hoopla, a lot of, I think Overdrive is just like tied to the Libby app. But yeah, so magazines and ebooks, can be read through the Libby app. But I wasn't able to get an account facilitated, I think, because we just don't have the amount of, publisher account, because we don't have a huge amount of issues. They were like, you have to go through another route to, get your chapbooks into our system or other library systems and stuff like that, or things like that. I think that's, yeah. Anyways, I'll circle back maybe one day to some of the places that said no, and see where we're at a later point, we have more built up, or, a relaunch settled and stuff like that. But yeah, Libby, Hoopla, Overdrive, Libby and Overdrive. So there are some great library-based ones. There was a service I had reached out to as well that did like digitization of publications and stuff. And all you had to do was, have your, PDF file or things like that. And some of the services, right, you have, so for the ones I mentioned earlier in the podcast, like caffeine and stuff like that, they have, every place has a different like upload process for like, and on the back end for sharing issues, the next releases and stuff, and PDF files, straight up PDF files. So it's not hard at all or complicated. Very simple, very easy to do. And and then like chapbooks and other stuff like that, like for a lot of digital readers and stuff, more so for like, I would say, I think Libby, Overdrive. I think I've seen more so like, Word docs and stuff on the back, and like Draft to Digital, right? Like they only accept Word docs and stuff. But yeah, so that's all I can think of. The main thing, the tough thing with a lot of reader apps and getting into, web and digital platforms, again, comes down to cost and your budget. But you're bound to find, if you're really interested in doing some sort of paywall membership subscription system, you are bound to find something out there. There are a lot of options available. Just some are more costly than others, and a couple are free, or they have, they take a percentage, right, away from, what you got overall, from, sometimes it's a monthly or yearly split, or, they have different time frames, windows, and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's all I can think of. Again, I highly recommend, any app or service or thing, you're considering, it's always a good idea to do like a trial or something to learn more about it. And, there are several other ones out there that I didn't mention. And, and again, if your publication is solely online digital, go for the digital options out there. I mentioned some of the ones I will put links in the description. And, I shared on a couple episodes back about, Substack, right? They have a subscriber model for, your, emails and stuff you can do and send out to others. You can set up, paid, paywalls, right, for the content on your Substack. But if you're more so trying to find something for issues and that subscription model and stuff, yeah, you may totally want to look at an integration or something out there. Tons of ones out there. Again, a very good benefit of the CLMP membership is having access to, a list of resources and places that do so, or to ask other fellow lit magazine journals what they're using, and how's it going for them, how did they set up their subscription model, so you can exchange that information with through the CLMP membership. And they have a lot of great lists, resources, and things like that on their site, member only, that you can investigate, or you can reach out to them, of course, when you're on their membership, and ask others, and find what perhaps is the best option out there. Because again, I don't have a lot of knowledge on print subscription models, but have heard quite a few places find something tying into WordPress, or WordPress capable options embedded in the site. And for membership access, paid account access stuff for subscriptions to digital issues and print. So I think it's a lot easier again to do digital, subscriptions. A lot of places are out there again for web and mobile access. So it's just a matter of, what you're looking for, I think it takes time to get to like your own branded app or things like that. But a lot of free spaces exist out there. It's just a matter of, you have to get approved into them. Sometimes they have to screen your publication. Sometimes you have to send samples like I did, or have available samples on your site, free ones to flip through, and always a good idea. So I hope this episode helped you. Just sharing my experience, predominantly of digital subscription systems, mobile magazine app readers. I didn't cover like general, flip through digital readers just for others to access issues and stuff like that. This was more so, paywalling stuff. Now, there are other ones out there I didn't mention, in terms of, that capability, like digital flipping and stuff, and interactive ones. But maybe I can go over that later. I'm sure most have heard about Issue, ISSU, hazing, and Flip Snack, and I mentioned Yoompu, so those are sort of more so on that. But Yoompu does have, a cool like mobile market type thing, where others can read magazines, or you can get your own app, but it's very costly. Let me see how much that is, by the way. I wonder what their prices look like right now. It's been a while since I've been on their site. So, they call it their kiosk option. I think it's like, it looks like for their highest plan options, like almost $300 something a month. And that's for like your own iOS and Android app. And there are additional fees, for that aren't included in that probably. Like the annual, fee for your, like, I think either Apple, for Apple, or, Android is much cheaper than Apple, but it can be very costly. It can be several $100s a month, or several $100s a year for whichever, for some of these out there. And, they do have lower ones, web-based one, I think it's like $70 a month for Yoompu, but a lot of flipbook services out there, that you could set up some sort of, some sort of, monetization or additional ways to get, to generate something to help cover expenses, so when you're putting together your print issue, again, I just would be very cautious on, staying consistent with your page count, and you just want consistency across the board in your issues. Highly always suggest, check out, what some of the other publications are in some of these apps and spaces that you're trying to enter and get into, and use that as a, a guide for yourself, an example. And so I mentioned a couple of different, services, platforms to check out, mobile app readers, and I don't see a lot of poetry in some of these readers, but there are, in some of the larger ones for sure, there are, I've seen from time. I think I saw Poetry Magazine in one of the ones I mentioned or something. But there are definitely some really neat ones out there. I'm sure over time there'll be even more. Readly is, I think, one of my faves, and caffeine. And yeah, I think Readly is very low cost. Caffeine isn't too bad. And yeah, so totally check those out. And yeah, take care, guys, and have awesome days ahead. P.S. guys, I just wanted to tack this on and clarify what I meant by branded apps. So again, some magazine platforms out there, digital reader apps, they have, again, the ability where you can customize a mobile app and, they push it to the app store. You can have your logo, your name on it. And yeah, again, if you do a search in the app store for magazine reader apps or magazine readers, you'll find them, a bunch of, various apps, and then also branded apps that others have, out there in the magazine world. And yeah, obviously it's very, very cool to have your own app, for your magazine, and, a dedicated central library for all the issues, but that's, again, very costly typically. And yeah, I also mentioned, some other subscription paywall methods to tie into your website for print and digital. Again, I mentioned some of the ones. I think I said Profile Press. There's some other ones like alternatives to leaky paywall, which I've heard about in the community. You can just type like alternatives to Profile Press, alternatives to leaky paywall. I'm sure you'll come up with a bunch of other ones out there. Again, I have very limited knowledge in, print subscription facilitation. More so, I'm, more familiar with digital subscription, apps and platforms. And yeah, you really just have to reach out, contact places, and sometimes set up meets and calls with them, and yeah, go from there. And yeah, I think it's so important, again, to have that accessibility, to improve accessibility of your magazine and issues and things like that. Not everyone can grab print issues. Sometimes print is more expensive, than a digital subscription. Sometimes, digital issues or others who have PDFs, sometimes they're close to the print price. But in typical, subscription models, it's supposed to be a way to bundle things, for, it could be for the month, for the year, to get the issues, to your reader base. And I'd highly recommend, again, I think it's good to start, when you've established, your layout and everything for your issues. You can showcase to whichever platform, you're looking to go with, say, these are our issues, these are our series, these are samples of it, and of course they have to choose whether it's a fit for their platform and stuff. Some places absolutely do, screen them and say yay or nay or yes or no, so yeah, it's bound to happen. Not everyone is loves poetry or certain things, it happens. So I've gotten comments, again, others saying, oh, it's not popular, or it's a very, very small category, and yeah, so you really just have to keep trying, and it's totally possible. Again, I managed to get Deputy Lit Mag into one space and a few others, but it came down to those not being free and cost-wise, so I was not able to move forward with them. But, in the event something ever changes budget-wise, totally, I think it'd be pretty neat to set up an app of some kind or something for Deputy like that. We're always on our phones. A lot of people are, but it's just easier to read, from a mobile device or even from your laptop. A lot of the platforms have the option of both, again, web or mobile apps, and that's really cool and great. So I think as time goes on, a lot of magazines, will, continue to be, digitally available. A lot of places each year, carrying physical print subscription, physical print, issues, stands and stuff like that. We don't see as many of those like the old days, right? Like newsstands, magazine stands. I saw something on social media recently. One got closed down, just like one of those magazine stand places. And yeah, so it's always a good idea to have, again, as I mentioned, multiple options for others to read and access your publication, so totally. And yeah, you want to really keep in mind, what your goal release is for each year. How many issues do you send out or complete? Is it 2 a year, 4, 5, 6? You want to make sure you can meet that every year for your subscribers. Or if you need to adjust that, let's say you need to cut down from 3 a year to 2 a year, it's better to do that earlier than later to really get that consistency in terms of release and releasing issues, So, yeah, definitely, again, I mentioned this earlier just now, but, platforms and places like to see that you've established, your reader base, that you have traction on it. I don't know, probably some places look at your following. Obviously, I don't like that, being in a numbers game or stuff like that. But ultimately, it also comes down to the quality of your issues and the focus of it, the organization, the design. And so you want to make sure, for a lot of spaces out there, platform-wise that you're trying to get into, like your issues and stuff like that. Even, physical locations, I think, too. You want to make sure you've established issues, I think, I didn't start, again, I mentioned this, didn't start contacting places until about issue 4, around that time. Issue 4's completion. And, when I was reaching out to some of the mobile and web-based subscription platforms. So you want to start earlier with it than later, but you could always, do it later. And something I always ask places is like, are we restricted to just your platform or things like that? Or can we be in multiple places, right? Because you want to make sure about that and be sure. Always a good idea to be accessible in as many of the spaces and platforms as possible, reader-wise, digitally, especially. Same applies to, print, getting into as many locations as possible, increasing your readership, and, it helps. In terms of, like, how much you get back again from each place or platform you get your magazine in, it varies, again, I mentioned various split models that these places have. So, yeah. And it can be hard for some of the higher pricing ones. So that's why, again, I'm going to stress that you should make sure that you have established, your readership, your subscribers, an amount, that can, offset the cost of any platform that's not free. Because there are very few, places, again, out there that are 100% free, cost to you for, uploading issues and sending it to them to put in their platform. So, that's all I wanted to share. And now take care, guys. Now bye, I promise, yeah.